Hello, everyone. Welcome to the You Are the Spell podcast. It is me, it is Aunt Carla, and I am so excited to chat today with Hana O'Neill, the Suburban Witch, all the way from Australia. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. We've done a swapsies. You've been on my podcast. Now I'm on yours. It's very exciting.
Yes, it is. And you're in Australia, so right now it is 8:15 in Eastern Standard Time or Eastern Time. So what time is it in Australia?
It's 10:15 a.m. So I've just dropped the kids at school, come home, got myself a cup of tea, and now we're recording together.
How exciting. And I love, I'm so excited, or just to be able to say, I know someone, I know a witch in Australia, because, whenever I'm talking about the different, um, the different holidays or Sabbaths here, I will always say, oh, and shout out to Hannah in Australia because they're doing the exact opposite. Because I mean, we're online, we're international, we're global. So I cannot assume that anyone listening is only in the Northern Hemisphere.
Mhm.
And how do you feel about that? Because I think um, but before we even before we even introduce you officially, how do you feel as an Australian person where sometimes certain things might feel to be skewed towards the northern hemisphere? What's that like?
So majority of the witchy books, majority of the
Mm-hmm.
witchy content is for the Northern Hemisphere, which
Hmm.
does make it really tricky. And especially for any new witches who are in the Southern Hemisphere, which is more than obviously just Australia. We
Sure.
have a lot of the southern parts of Africa. We have, especially South Africa, a lot of people there that are like, I feel confused. What do I celebrate here? Then we
Ah.
have, South America as well. So where it's the total flip side. And I also like to note anyone that is close to the equator doesn't have a lot of these holidays in the same respect. It's not a complete opposite like it would be for me in things like the equinoxes. When it's your autumn equinox, it's our spring equinox, vice
Mhm.
versa. But if you're on the equator, it's always an equinox. Like it's always equal. They don't have solstices because the sun is always equal. So I love to look at the creative aspect of how would I celebrate if I was living in Bali in Indonesia? How would I
Mm.
celebrate if I was close to the equator and I didn't notice those shifts and those changes in my natural environment? Which, honestly, being here in North Australia, I don't notice them as much as when I used to be in South Australia, in Victoria. So
Wow.
I've even had to navigate that up here. Like, oh, it's hot all year round here. I'm in the subtropics. We have a little bit of variance in the times of, sunset and sunrise and that sort of thing, but it's much less than it used to be. So it's coming back to the cycle aspect. So, for
Mm.
example, people who might be in the equator regions or even somewhere like the Northern Territory of Australia, where there isn't seasons like summer, winter, autumn, and spring. Instead, they have a wet season and a dry season.
Ah.
So I would like to tell people that the wheel of the year is really it's like the moon cycle. There is a growing and a dimming phase, and obviously a high point and a low point for either of those. So you
Mhm.
could look at like the wet season as your growing phase and the dry season as the dimming phase, right? Look at what's
Mhm.
around you and what grows better or what doesn't grow better at different times of year. Choose it from that. And then you can ramp up things and, take some of the practices from things like our summer solstice and put them in the high point of your wet season. And then the points in between where it shifts from wet to dry, that's your equinox. So it's like a nice different way to look at it, but there's not much content. There is nothing in books, and it can be very confusing. And a lot of people simply just scrap most of the Sabbats because they're like, I can't be bothered. Nothing is relevant and nothing
Right.
resonates.
Right.
Mm.
That is a really good point. When we talk about seasons and cycles, if you're not experiencing the same thing, or if you're somewhere where it doesn't even change much,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to have that same, it's not going to resonate the same. So thank you
Yeah.
for saying that. And I think, um, so we have a mutual friend, Mandy M, like Healing for Hot Messes. Like something that I've heard her talk about is when you're creating your own year, like she doesn't even bother with she's like, that doesn't resonate with me at all anyway. And she's like, I'm not into astrology. I'm not into the Sabbats. I have my own thing. So I think those of us who are, creating our own practice, dear listener, if any of these things, if any of these things that you're reading don't resonate with you, you are free to create your own practice depending on what is going on around you, what's going on month to month, whether it is 4 seasons or 2 seasons or astrology or whatever that is for you. So I'm a big proponent of which is finding their own sovereignty, whatever that looks like. So before I go on, let me make sure that I let people know about you, Hana. It's so funny. I have to say it. So Hana, you spell your name Hana, and all this time I'm like, it's Hana, and she's like, no, it's Hana, and I'm like, oh, okay. So Hana, Hana. So Hana O'Neill, she has so many awesome things going on, and before we go too deep into those things, but we will, I want to let you know. So her goal is to make witchcraft and alternative spirituality fun, informative, and accessible to all. Hana runs a course on psychic divination, blogs about witchcraft and astrology with pop culture references to fandoms such as Disney, and she hosts the podcast Witch Talks, interviewing key witches in the community. Actually, I've been a guest, so I guess that makes me a key witch too. Not to mention, Hana also has a thriving YouTube channel with content from spellcrafting, tarot tutorials, witchcraft basics, and even very important, very interesting, she even details her own journey from Pentecostal Christian to proud witch, which I cannot wait to get into. So officially, thank you so much for being here, introducing Hana O'Neill, the Suburban Witch, and from Witch Talks.
Happy to be
here. Oh, by the way, and speaking of time zone, it's like evening here, and you can see it like in the background because I'm like in a quote unquote sunroom, and it's morning. So if you're watching this, dear reader, dear listener, you can see like just the different times, the different light being reflected, but in no way does it take away from our magic. So
correct.
So where do I start? Well, you know what? Let me start with the morning routine. So first, when I was on your podcast, I was on Witch Talks a while ago. You had sent me, very organized. You sent me some sample questions, and one of them was like, what is your morning routine? And I was like, oh my God, what is my morning routine? I don't know, like I needed to come up with something really, witchy sounding. And I was like, and things, I don't really have a set one. So I remember telling you at the time, well, I go and I pull an oracle card for the day. Like I've done that, but it's not, honestly, it has not been what's the word, consistent, but it is something I have done from time to time, and it's good when I do it, right? It's good when we have that some kind of thing that we do. And then recently you showed something on your Instagram or TikTok about your morning routine, which was showing letting your kids like watch a kids show so you can have some morning tea in peace. And I thought, see, here it was. I was trying to come up with this really witchy kind of morning routine when, you were keeping it real. You're like, I need a minute to myself. So I'm letting my kids watch this morning show. So what does your morning routine look like these days?
So I am not a morning person. I'm just going to put that out there. And you know what? I wish someone had told me that before I had kids, because kids are not conducive to non-morning person people. Like the kids are just like up at the crack of dawn. You're like, what are you doing? I am a nighttime person. My standard bedtime, my natural bedtime is midnight. That is when I start to feel sleepy. And I'm like, oh, I should think about going to bed. And my children's natural wake up time is 6 a.m., which doesn't allow for a lot of sleep. So, yeah, I am one of those mums. I like to call myself a scrunchy mum. I'm like a little bit crunchy, a
Hmm.
little bit silky. So, if you don't know those terms, a crunchy mum is someone who's like only organic food, no red food dye color 40, no TV time, wooden toys only, like that sort of a person. And a
Yeah.
silky mom is like, here's the iPad and here is your Fruit Loops for breakfast, right? Like total opposites. I'm somewhere in the middle. I
Okay.
like a mix of both. So in the mornings though, because I just don't function yet, I also have ADHD. So my circadian rhythm is delayed. I'm not functioning yet. So I'm like, you know what? Here is the TV. I've turned it on. Mum needs her coffee. And I'm just going to respond in grunts for a little bit until I wake up.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
okay. Sometimes I go back to bed now that the kids are a little bit older. I can do that. I know they're safe. But yeah, that is my witchy morning routine. It's literally coffee and make sure the kids are, entertained and I can have some extra sleep. So that's my morning routine. Once they're all dropped off at school and I've started to wake up a little bit, I don't have too many like super witchy things that I do, but I do try and do what I call a magical morning routine where I send a voice note to my best friend every day and she sends one to me. And we start off just saying anything we're grateful for. And then we tell each other about our day as if it's already happened. So, like,
Nice.
oh my gosh, today I had this interview with Aunt Carla and it was amazing. We had the best conversation. It absolutely rocked, right? So, I'm
Yeah.
putting that intention out to the universe. Like, this is what the day is going to be like. And it also tells my subconscious and it helps me to sort of prioritize what I actually need to get done. So that's really good. And then at the very end of our little voice note, we put in a future thing. So we say, and you know what? How awesome was it when we got to meet up together in Byron Bay? We both flew down there or drove down there and had a girls' weekend. Wasn't that amazing? Right? We put in something that we really want to do. Or my course launch went phenomenal. I had so many people sign up. I'm so ecstatic. So we're putting the future goals in there. And the best part about this is because you do it every day. If you do it once, you're like super excited. You do it twice, super excited. Doing it every single day, you're like, oh my God, what is my future goals? Like I've said them all. What
Mm.
what am I going to do now? It makes you get so clear about what you actually want, what's really important to you. And you notice that these goals shift and change as well. It's really, really cool to watch. And then you can sort of egg each other on, like, you said the other day you were going to do this, you still haven't done that. Come on. What are you doing? It's good. I like it. So that's my current magical morning routine. I can't take full credit for it. I did get that from Gala Darling. She talks about the magical morning routine. So that is from her. But I do love it. I think it's really easy and I can just do it when I'm driving or putting on my makeup. So it's a nice, easy one.
I like that. I'm gonna have to talk to my witchy bestie and see, hey, you want to try something like that? That really it's like something it's easy to sustain. And I'm all about what can I commit to that is easy to sustain because it's I either, lose interest or just life gets in the way. So it has to be something. Now also, is it a phone call or just like a voice memo?
It's just a voice memo because, as I said, I've got kids. If the kids are around me when I'm trying to do that, my voice note is like 15 minutes long. And the whole way I'm like, I'm so sorry because the kids are like, hello, and they're trying to join in, or it takes, don't put that down. There's a lot of life in there.
Yeah.
So I try to do it once they've been dropped off. For reference, my kids are 2 and 6.
Oh,
And with the voice note, it just means I can do it whenever I need to. Sometimes I forget and I don't do it till 1 p.m. That's totally fine.
sure.
And she's usually, on her run or going to work or whatever she's doing. So it just means that we can do it when it's easy for us, which is the whole point of, I
Yeah.
think, any form of ritual. It has to, you're right,
Yes.
not impede with normal life stuff and has to remain fun and easy, right? Sometimes my voice notes are 4 minutes, sometimes they're 15 minutes. The 4 minute one, everyone's got 4 minutes. You can do 4 minutes whilst you're
Yeah.
walking back from school drop off or whatever you're doing. That's easy to do.
Okay. Okay. Now, I first found you or first saw you um via the Instagram Reels. I mean, I've also since seen you on TikTok, so I know that TikTok is maybe where you've kind of really got your groove. but you have these really cute reels, like snappy and just funny and just kind of day in the life things. And I just, that's one of the things I really admire about you, Hannah, is your videos. So I want to say TikToks because I feel like you started there. Like, is that true? Did you really find your groove on TikTok and then move it to Instagram, or were you doing it at the same time? And
So
also, how did that come about?
when I started my business, I knew I needed social media. So
Hmm.
I started a Facebook page and I started an Instagram page. And back then it was just Instagram with photos, right? It was just some photos. And I kept hearing people talk about TikTok. I didn't really know what it was.
Hmm.
I'm a millennial, and this was pre-pandemic, right? This
Right,
was,
right.
I think, at that point, 2019. And I was like, I don't know what that TikTok thing is, but it sounds new and scary, and I don't want anything to do with it. But I did start my YouTube. So I had my YouTube channel, and oh my gosh, my first videos. I definitely have the mindset of start with what you have and grow from there.
Yes.
So my first videos were my phone propped up. I didn't have anything to hold it, just propped up on the table and hoping that it didn't fall, and just press record and then upload. I didn't edit. I didn't have a script. I free talked, and it was not very enjoyable to watch a lot of the time, but I was just putting it out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Now it's very that's very different, but we all grow from somewhere. And so I
Sure.
had those sorts of things, and I was doing a YouTube video every single week, which is a lot. And then I was listening to the Gary V podcast, and
Oh,
he said, if you're
mhm.
not on TikTok, you got to get on TikTok. And I was like, oh, fine. I'll download this TikTok thing and have a look at what it is. I have ADHD, so I very quickly became obsessed with TikTok. And I was like, I'm already comfortable doing videos. Why not do one of these things? So I did a couple, and I actually started very early on reusing what my blog posts were. So I was like, I've got a blog post on, the 5 ways that you know you've had a past life.
Uh-huh.
So let me put that into video form. So I just took my headlines from the blog post. It was like number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. And I
Ah.
just stood there and just pointed and just put the text there. And it went viral. And that was my first video that went viral. I woke up the next morning to, I think at that point it was 100,000 views. And then within an hour, there was 200,000 views. And the comments were coming in. And I was like, oh, what do I do? And it was wonderful because I saw my website analytics go boom, straight up
Ah.
as well. Because it directed people, you want more information, read the blog post. So suddenly I had all these people over on my blog post. And then, I was like, okay, great. Well, why don't I make a YouTube video with the same content from that blog post? So I did that as well. So this is my first introduction to short form content
Yes.
and long form content.
And
And so,
repurposing.
yes, repurposing as well. So I started doing that very early on. And I considered TikToks to be a trailer for my long form content.
Nice.
So I did that, and I got on at a really good time. So I was on at the end of 2019, and the pandemic hit. And by that point, I was already fully online. I didn't do any in-person meetings anymore, fully online, and really set up for that. And I had a couple other videos go viral, which threw people over to my YouTube. So my YouTube started to grow. It's over 12,000 subscribers now, which is wonderful. So it sort of propelled this growth period for me, which was really wonderful. TikTok has since changed, and obviously Instagram has changed as well. So we have reels, they're on Facebook. It sort of just permeates everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But the stand there and point at text thing is not cool anymore. I'm like, oh, that's not what I was good at. And I did burn out a little bit after a while, because I was posting videos at least once a day, if not more. So what I would do is I started batching my content. So I'd film a few videos in a day, and then I was just exhausting myself. So now if I want to film videos, sometimes I literally just set my camera up as I clean my witchy study, my workspace, and then do a voiceover later. It's like a low maintenance form of video content. It's also showing people that I'm a normal human being, and this is
Mm-hmm.
part of my normal day-to-day stuff. And if you want more information, I have so much on my YouTube or so much on my blog. Like, there's so much free content. My podcast is so much free content people can access now, that I can just simply direct them there with other forms of video. So that's kind of been the journey and how it is. But yeah, the TikTok, I mean, it's currently think 126,000. It's kind of been sitting there for a little while. Hasn't been
Not
growing
bad.
as much as it did in the. It's an amazing amount. Hasn't been growing as much as that first year. That was the real boom factor, but it's still a wonderful method of communication, and the editing, the way they've changed the way you can edit on there is just so easy. I do most of it on there just because it's so easy to do.
Now, do you do more? Because so I've heard that Instagram doesn't want you to create stuff on TikTok and then put it there, especially in, if you can see the TikTok watermark. But I still see people doing TikTok, so I still see TikTok watermarks all the time. So do you do anything differently? What is your process? Will you start on one platform and then share it on another, or do you do something to remove a watermark, or are you like, this is just, I can't be bothered, I'm just going to slap it up there? Like, what do you do now?
So it depends. If it's for my podcast, I create a trailer using Premiere Pro, and then I will individually upload it to the different apps so
Okay.
that it's just original content on that app. But
Ah,
when I'm filming those cleaning videos, or this is me getting ready for my day or whatever it is, I will film that on my phone camera and then upload it and then do the voiceover. Sometimes I cannot be bothered doing the voiceover 2 times for 2 different apps. So I will upload it to TikTok, and then I usually use a watermark remover and download it and re-upload it to Instagram. I still get more views on my Instagram reels, even if they are a TikTok one that I've downloaded through the watermark remover. So it's fine. It works for me.
Okay, that's what I figured, because I'm like, I still see, I'm like, that looks like a TikTok video. I mean, not that it looks like have you left the or it's been a while maybe. I mean, do you leave the TikTok watermark on ever these days, or you just put it through the TikTok?
Correct. I download it through the TikTok. It's called Snaptic. It's just you put the URL in and it downloads it without a watermark.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so Snaptic. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So then do you know, and you don't notice a difference when you remove the watermark? There's no
If a
difference.
video is good, it's going to get good regardless, is my opinion.
That's
The
what I'm
algorithm
thinking.
is more based on how many times people watch it
Mm-hmm.
and how many times they share it with someone or save it. Like, that's the things that the algorithms are geared for. I'm sure that they try not to push out videos that are obviously going to send people to another app.
Right.
But if it's getting a lot of people on their app, they're going to keep it up there.
Yeah, yeah. Because I still see plenty of people with their watermark, with their TikTok watermark. I'm like, no, it's still working. So there you go. Snaptic. Just write a Snaptic, and I will add that to the show notes. Snaptic. Okay. So what would you say? So there's so many different things that you talk about, or that you have specialties in. And what would you say is, when it comes to like your products and services, what's the most popular thing? I want to talk about all the stuff that you do, but right at this very moment, what's the thing that people are like, oh my goodness, I want this from Hana? Like, what's the most popular product in your toolbox?
So at the moment, my classes have been really popping off, which is amazing. So
Nice.
I have a tarot class that I do. I recently presented a tea leaf reading class that was in person only. That sold out in less than 2 days. That was
Nice.
phenomenal. So the tea leaf reading class, I have a candle magic class, and I have a psychic class as well. So all of those have been really, really popular this year. I've tried to put more of my energy towards those so I can access more people with less time. I do have some chronic health stuff as well, so I have to do that as much as possible. So trying to get to more people is really, really helpful. So I've also got my courses as well. But again, they're not available all the time. There's certain open periods and enrollment periods for classes and courses. So aside from that, with my just general services, my guidance calls are the most popular. So I used to just put them up. So back in the baby Suburban Witch days, I used to put up a tarot reading call or an astrology call, and people could book for that. But they would ask me a question. I was like, I could answer that so well if I had your chart as well. And I noticed I started I was really mixing all of my knowledge and all of my information in these calls. I'm like, well, then I feel bad because you've booked a tarot and I've started doing this astrology. It's not what you booked. So I changed it. I rebranded my calls and made them a guidance call. And I noticed that's what people were coming to me for. They didn't specifically want the tarot, they wanted my guidance. So I was
Yes.
like, great. I have people that book me to help them decipher what their dream means, to interpret their dream. I have people book me who are new at witchcraft and they're like, I don't know what books to read, and this is what I want to learn about. Or maybe I want to create these sorts of spells and I don't know what to do. So I help guide them in spellcrafting. Or perhaps they just want to know how deity work works. So we can do that. We can look at things like helping people attain their goals with either the tarot or astrology. We can look at all sorts of things, and I have all of those tools that I can bring into that depending on what they actually want. So now it's just a guidance call, 30 minutes or 60 minutes, and sometimes people they're like, can we add on an hour? I need more. So or maybe I need to put a 2-hour option on there, but that is the thing that people seem to be coming to me most for. And I do have some cheaper options as well, because not everyone can afford the 1-hour call, for example. I have one new service called a quick fix spell advice. So for the people that are like, I want to make a spell, I don't know what I'm doing, how do I do it? Instead of doing the video call, I contact them through email within 24 hours, like, hey, this is what you need, this is how you're going to do it, and give them a custom spell basically through
Yeah.
email or Instagram DM, however is easiest for them. So that's been really good as well. That's a newer one.
Well, I remember when we were talking through DM, like in our little group chat, you had just mentioned it, like you had posted it when it was brand new, and then someone signed up for it right away, and you're like, wow,
Immediately.
yeah, and like, yeah, I don't even know if you'd even announced it, but you
I
just put it on
hadn't.
your site.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also a testament to people who want that
Mm-hmm.
guidance from you, and this thing didn't exist until this particular time, and they happen to come onto your website and say, oh my goodness, I want this. Aha.
Mm-hmm.
So that's fantastic. And also,
Yeah.
speaking of websites, so you just like revamped your whole website. Like, how are you doing right now? Like, I feel like you're definitely on this really cool wave. You're just blossoming. And this website is part of that. So how are things going?
So this year, at the start of every year, I choose a word for the year, and I
Mm.
chose the word elevate. And that has been, in my mind, every decision that I make, every business decision, every spiritual decision, everything that I do, even down to when I go shopping for clothes, is this with my goal of elevate? Does this elevate my wardrobe? Does this elevate my business? Does this elevate my spiritual practice? Where is this bringing me? So
Mm.
that's what I've been trying to do. And the website was a part of that. It was the biggest business expense I've ever had, which means it's terrifying to do something like that.
Sure.
But it's also necessary in order to grow. And I'm so happy with it. My sales have gone up because it's easier to make a sale now. I used to get DMs from people saying, hey, I added it to my cart and nothing happened. And I'm like, oh yeah, you have to go and click the cart. And it just wasn't clear. And now it sort of pops up and directs people there automatically. And it's just easier, more streamlined, and it looks more professional. So that has been part of it. And in the back end, I'm also currently still working on it. We're making a little membership area within the website that's going to look fantastic. So there's still more coming, right? But
Sure.
yeah, definitely in the elevation stage this year.
Oh, how exciting. I love this. I love the elevate as like the word of the year,
Mm,
and and just kind of filtering all the different actions that you're taking through that word.
mhm,
And I feel it's clear that doing this website was an elevation for you, and it's enabled you to do all these other things. And because I remember before this was happening, when you were working with another organization to teach your class, and I remember saying like, you have everything you need, you just have everything, you could do it, you could do it. And I mean, but I didn't know what your back end was like. So
mhm,
now you have the opportunity for people to, to get to learn with you, and to purchase your classes and all these different things. So of course, now that all that other friction has been removed, you're able to, to run and fly and jump and like, yeah. And so I'm excited to hear about your possible, well, your upcoming, membership group as well. And that's just like, ooh, like that's so juicy.
Mhm.
Like it, like from where I'm sitting, that feels like really juicy. So I imagine hopefully it feels juicy for you too.
Yeah. And I'm really grateful that I found a website designer that was super aligned. Like even down to the fact that all of her invoices are like, they have, angel numbers in them, right? They're like 444 or 888 or like they're they're all repeating numbers. I'm like, I love that that's all her pricing. Like she's like, to add this thing, it's this. I'm like, of course it is.
Oh, so now is she also like from a spiritual?
Yes, she
Of course
is.
she
And she actually took one of my candle magic class as well. So she has experienced what it is that I do, which is
is.
great because then that helps when she's, doing the website and everything as well. She's experienced it. She's not coming in as, can you imagine if I had someone who wasn't witchy or spiritual? They would be like,
No.
what is this and why are we writing this word on here? Like oh my gosh, no, I couldn't do that.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's great though, because then everything is in alignment, and they get you. They get
Yeah,
you, they understand the work. And
yeah.
it's just much more fun, I think, to work with people who are also spiritually business minded,
Mhm.
and they get it. So, you don't have to explain angel numbers to them. You don't have to explain, well, this podcast is about, you don't have to, you don't have to shrink. You can say, yes, this is it. This is what I'm doing. And yes, and here you go.
Mhm.
So it also sounds and this was like a really good investment for you, an
Mhm.
investment in your business. And what would you say to anyone else who is thinking about, oh my God, there's this thing that I feel like would really help my business, but it might be a little pricey.
Mm.
Ooh, what do I do? Any words of advice on how to deal with that?
Yeah, so I put it off for years, 4 years, I think. I put that off
Mhm.
because I made my own website. I did it myself. It wasn't terrible. It was a lot of white, which if you know me, I'm very colorful. I I look back, I'm like, oh, it was so boring, but it worked and it was there. It didn't look terrible.
Right,
So I coasted with that for as long as possible because whilst I made it myself, I'm still paying website hosting fees
right.
and all of the other things, right? And it got to the point where I was like, no, this has come up enough times where people have DM'd me saying they don't know how to purchase or that sort of a thing. And I'm like, I really need to, as I said, elevate. I need to take it to that next level. I could do that. I could figure it out. It's going to take me a really long time and it's going to be a lot of mental energy and it's going to take me away from my services and my creative side. I'm sure you can tell just by listening to me. I do a lot of things in a very short amount of time. I have two little children. I have a husband in the military who goes away all the time. He's away at the moment. I think he's in Fiji. I'm not sure. He's away all the time. So I'm solo parenting a lot. And then I also have chronic health issues and chronic illness. So, a lot of the time I cannot work. Or that's why that quick fix spell advice was great because it's something I can do via email. I can do that if I can't be sitting at my desk. I can do that when I'm in bed. It's something that it works with me and my health restrictions. So doing the website was kind of can I afford it? Yes, I can. Is it going to help me bring in more money and do the things that really matter to me? Yes, it will. And time wise, doing it myself was just, it was one of those like, oh, I just don't want to. And I'm so grateful that I'm in a position now where I don't have to, right? It was a little stretch to kind of work it into my budget, but it's already paid. It's already paid back, right? It's already paid for itself. So I'm, you know, so grateful that I've been in that position. It is scary, but sometimes you also have to show yourself that you can do it, right? And I just think the aspect of letting someone who it is their job, that's what they're there to do, they're going to get it done faster and better than I ever could have, right?
Yes, yes. We were
So,
speaking earlier before we hit record on the zone of genius.
mhm.
And so my understanding of the zone of genius is like we have these different things that we can do. And there's things that we have the zone of pretty good, the zone of
Yeah.
excellence, the zone of yeah, I can do this if I'm pressed, okay, and it'll be all right. The zone of okay, but the zone
Mhm.
of genius is the place where you really shine.
Mm.
And if you pay for someone, you pay for the service for someone to do something like your website or something else, they will do it so much quicker and they'll do it just a really, great job of something while you are able to focus on your zone of genius. And,
Mhm.
so someone else, they can do a website, they can like, how long did it take your web designer to do it? Because I feel like it was fast. Seemed pretty
Yeah,
quick.
once we started on it, so she did send me like a here, this is what I'm thinking.
Hmm.
So she sent me like a video showing me through it, and that was kind of like the first draft, and I was
Hmm.
like, yeah, cool, go for it. It was like there was nothing I wanted to change. A couple of things like I don't like that font or whatever it was,
Yeah, yeah.
and then that was pretty much after the first payment, maybe 2 weeks, she had that first mock up. And then I think 2 weeks later, she was like, well, we're pretty good. Are you happy with all of this? And it was just a few, uh, this has to be input on there. She had to do a lot of like, it was a whole new website and we
Yep.
transferred the information across. So there was a lot of putting this over here, creating a template, all of that. She did a really, really good job. I reckon maybe 6 weeks was the total to get it actually launched,
Yeah,
which
I mean,
was
considering this isn't you already, to me, that is very quick because you already had a website, you already had blog posts, you already had all this other stuff. It's one thing if it's a brand new blog or website and there's not all this other stuff, but now she had to transfer everything over and she was able to do that really quickly and you didn't lose any time. And so like if that was me trying to do that myself, or you trying to do that yourself, how long would that take you? Especially because you have all these other things going on.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
because yeah, like yeah, I can build a website, I can do this stuff, but that's not really my zone of genius. So let me ask you, what do you consider your zone of genius?
My zone of genius is, I think it's slightly varied. I'm very, very creative. So
Mhm.
sometimes my zone of genius is in the creative aspects, which might be creating content, it might be creating fun videos, it might be creating podcasts and creating questions for that podcast, and writing blogs, writing my book, creating my tarot deck. It's all of these sorts of things, the things that light me up. That's where my zone of genius lies. Once we get into the detail stuff, so reading a contract or going through the fine print on anything,
Mm,
getting back to people on, or editing stuff. Like I'm good at editing, but I
sure.
don't love it, and it makes me just go, oh, do I have to?
The zone of pretty good.
Yeah, I kind of sometimes I'm like, I just want to record the video and then send it to someone and they do the rest. I want them to make, the graphics. I want them to make all the edits. But at this point, at the moment, editing for podcasts, editing for YouTube videos is very, very expensive. And a lot of the time, the people that do it don't know what the good bits were, if that makes sense,
Yeah,
and what can be cut out.
absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm still doing those things at the moment, but one day, I will
One
have a
day,
very
one day.
amazing witchy sidekick whose zone of genius will be in the editing all of those to perfection.
Yes, yes,
But yeah,
yes.
talking and creating, those are my zones of genius.
I love it. I love it. So let me change gears a little bit. One of the things that I think is really interesting about your story is the part about your Pentecostal past. And
Hmm.
now you are and now you're a witch.
Hmm.
And so there's this evangelical to witch pipeline or something that you have referred to that I think is so interesting because there are so many witches or spiritual practitioners who have grown up in church or who have grown up in some kind of really fundamental orthodox kind of religion, and they have had to like really unlearn a lot of stuff. And then not only that, when you share that information on your social media posts, then you have people like trolling you. And so how I would love to hear, if you don't mind, like kind of some of your journey. Like, how did you go from being being involved in sort of a more Pentecostal evangelical way of life to now I'm a witch and I'm, and I'm giving readings. Like, how did that happen?
It was a very convoluted and difficult journey.
Hmm.
I was a Christian because I was told I had to be a Christian, right?
Sure.
I was brought up that way. I was dedicated the moment I was born, basically. My parents took me up on stage at my mega church and said, "We will bring up this child in the ways of the Lord." And that was my life. Now, from a very young age, I was very spiritual. The only lens I had to view that through was the church. The only
Hmm.
language I had was the church and what the
Yeah.
church told me. And I knew I was connected. I knew there was something out there. So that felt right. When I was about 5 years old, I remember being at the altar of the church. So this is a mega church, there's thousands of people there.
Yeah.
And I was at the front praying, so hands raised up, praying that the Holy Spirit would take over, that the Holy Spirit would enter my body, and that I would talk in tongues. And these were sort of normal things, very spiritual. My church was
Yeah.
anything Pentecostal. They talk about the gifts of the Spirit. And so that language was second nature to me as a child. So I was out at the altar praying, and the pastor came and prayed for me. And they do this thing where they push on your head, and you're supposed to fall down and be slain in the spirit. And so I just kind of went, does it happen? Do I make it happen? Do I go with it, or does it happen to me involuntarily? And I wasn't really sure, but I didn't want to look. That's another part of the church. Didn't want to look like I wasn't doing it right. So I allowed him to sort of like push me down. I laid on the ground. I just kept praying. I was praying and praying and praying, and Lord, give me a sign, fill me with the Holy Spirit, whatever it was that I needed as a 5-year-old child, right? Now, I have a
Wow.
6-year-old, and I look at her and I'm like, I cannot imagine her doing that. But then
Right.
again, I haven't indoctrinated her into anything. She's totally free to make her own choices. And I teach her about Hinduism. I teach her about Buddhism. I teach her about Christianity. If she wants, I will go to church with her. Like, she doesn't want to, but the options are there, right? I never had those options. So as a 5-year-old, I'm there praying, and I had what I could only in that time describe as a vision. It was
Hmm.
like this little movie screen opened up in my brain, like I was dreaming, but I knew I was awake because I could still hear everyone around me. I could hear the music, and I could feel the ground under me, but I could see something in front of me. And it was this vision of me. I could see my hands. Obviously, I was a grown up. I could see my hands in front of me, and this group of children in front of me, all brown skinned, beautiful children looking up at me expectantly. They all had bare feet on a dirt floor. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be a missionary. Obviously, God has given me this vision to tell me that I'm going to be a missionary, because the only lens I had to view it with was what we saw in the church, which was
Right.
missions trips and white saviorism, and let's go to all these other countries. Forget about the homeless people outside of our church. Let's go to another country where we can feel good about ourselves, right? Like, if that was the lens. Obviously, not that sarcastic. That's my current adult view.
Right.
Time, it was a very noble cause, right? It was this beautiful thing that I wanted to do. And so when I finished praying, I sat up and I told the pastor, I said, I had a vision from God. And they said, you've got the gift of prophecy. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have the prophetic gift. And I remember I always had dreams, and I could tell you what the dreams meant. I could tell you what other people's dreams meant. And that also linked into the gift of prophecy. That is like Joseph and the coat of dreams, right? That's the gift of prophecy. So we went back to my mom and we told her, and this is the vision. Obviously, I was going to be a pastor and a minister and missionary.
Hmm.
So that was my trajectory. When I was 15, my parents divorced.
Oh.
I chose to live with my mum because I was a teenage girl, and that just felt right to go with my mum.
Right.
And because of that, and my mum was in the women's ministries. She did a lot of work in the church. And they turned around to us and said, you don't think you can come back here, do you? And this was the head pastor. And we were living in sin. My dad never got that talk. My dad
Sure.
was fine to go back, but we were not welcome.
But your dad was able to go back?
Oh yeah, dad was able to go back. My brother was able to go back, uh,
Wow.
but we were advised not to come back, which is getting kicked out of the church. The whole community. Now we used to go to church every Sunday morning, every Sunday night. I would go to small group on a Wednesday in someone's house, so prayer group, and on Fridays I would go to youth group. Now my
Mm-hmm.
church wasn't down the road either. My church was 35-40 minute drive away. So that's a lot of time spent at church.
Yes.
Sometimes more if there were events. All we knew were people from the church. We weren't allowed to have friends outside of the church. My
Like the
school
whole
was
social,
a
the
whole
social
social circle. It was very frowned upon to have friends who weren't in the church unless you were trying to get them to come to church, unless you were basically recruiting them, right? So my church was a Christian, my school, sorry, was a Christian school.
Mhm.
They taught creationism. They did not teach evolution. That was evil. That was wrong. There was a lot of stuff they taught that was very, very wrong and harmful to a lot of people's careers. But my church, the girls that were at my school were also from my church, were told you can't hang out with Hannah anymore.
Oh,
And so suddenly my friendship circles started to turn on me. I think I was the
wow.
only person whose parents had split up in my
That-
whole year level, at least. Like that was just wild. So I had no reference point. I had no friends who had gone through this. All of my friends were
Mhm.
pulled away from me, even really, really close family friends that felt like siblings, all gone instantly overnight. So that was very much a dark night of the soul that I didn't realize I was going through at the time because, but I'm supposed to be a missionary.
Right.
I'm supposed to do this. What does this mean for me? And I remember trying other churches and it wasn't right. It didn't feel right. Nothing felt right. And so I just went, you know what? Maybe I made that up. Obviously, I made that up. Maybe it's none of it's real. None of it is real. And I went the total opposite and I was like, obviously, I'm atheist now. So I probably had about a year or two as a very rebellious atheist ex-Christian girl, teenager. Did all
Mhm.
of the things I was never allowed to do, watched all
Mhm.
of the movies I was never allowed to do. I was smoking, I was drinking, I was doing all the stuff you're not supposed to do. And it was glorious. And don't smoke anyone, that's not great. Anyways, so then I think things started to creep back in and I was like, well, I still feel there's something there. I don't know what it is, but there's something. So agnostic was the term I took on for a while.
Mhm.
And I still tried going to churches a couple of times after that and different denominations. And again, nothing really felt right.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I was 21. No, I wasn't. I was 20. I was 20. And I went on I went on a holiday with a boyfriend. And I thought this was we're obviously getting serious because he's asked me to go on a holiday with him to another country. And we went to Cambodia.
Wow.
And went there, and within a few days, we broke up.
Oh dear. Oh wow.
Very violent, well, not violently, but violent from my behalf, where I
Yeah.
literally just get out. I refuse to continue with you.
Yeah.
And so I sent him home. He flew home. And I stayed in Cambodia. I was like, I booked a 2-week trip. I am staying for 2 weeks. So I traveled by myself, which I wasn't foreign to. I'd already traveled Europe by myself. But I was in Cambodia at 20 by myself, traveling around. And on my very last day, I paid this boy, Po. I said, hey, I know you've got a motorbike and you offer people lifts. Can I just pay you for the day and you just take me to all your favorite places, like all the places that you love? What do you do with your life? So he took me around. And one of the places he took me to was an orphanage. And he said, I often go past here and I bring some rice if I'm able to afford it. So I said, great, let's go buy some rice. Went and bought some rice, turned up at this orphanage, and I was wandering around. The orphanage director was there, and he said, oh, we're always looking for people who can come and teach English. We've got an English teacher here, but we need someone to give supplemental classes that speaks the language fluently. It's really helpful for their prospects, their education, all of this. And I was like, oh yeah. So he showed me the English classroom,
Mhm.
and the teacher who was there at the time, he said, come to the front, come and help. So I walk up to the front, I turn around, and I've got all these beautiful children standing in front of me on bare ground with bare feet,
Yes.
and I can see my hands in
And
front of me, and
full circle.
I had this full body reaction of, oh, it's my vision. Like, I've seen this before.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I didn't have the language for this at the time. So do you know what I thought this was?
Right.
I thought this was deja vu. Oh, deja vu, right? Because when I was 8 and I had a precognitive vision of my brother coming to jump on my sandcastle, I saw it before it happened. I told my mum, because I was like, Mom, I knew that was going to happen. I knew that was going to happen. And she's like, oh, that's just deja vu. Everyone gets that.
Mm.
So every time I had a precognitive vision, which is seeing the future, I pushed it away with, oh, that's just everyone gets that. That's normal. So at the time, my vision, I was like, okay, this is confirmation. I just thought it was deja vu, but it was also this like, oh, maybe I wasn't supposed to be a missionary. Maybe this was just showing me my future, that I was going to be here, right?
Right.
So I started to question things then, like, well, how does that work? How did I get that when I was 5? Why did I get that when I was 5? What has this taught me? I started to, explore that a little bit, and it did end up bringing me here with a few other bumps and things along the way. But it did show me that I was aligned. I was where I was supposed to be at that time. I ended up going home, quitting my job, selling my car, and saying, I'm moving to Cambodia.
Is that what you did?
Well, I did. I moved over there. I was going to go originally because there's visa requirements and stuff. I was originally going to go to Cambodia for 3 months to work in the orphanage. And then I ended up getting a working holiday visa for Canada. I was like, so I'll start in Cambodia, do 3 months there, and then I'll move to Canada and see what's there. And the only reason I chose Canada was because I am a sucker for punishment, and I hate the cold. I hate the cold. I hate the freezer section at the supermarket. I do not like cold. And so I thought, what better way to push myself out of my comfort zone than to pick one of the coldest places in the world? So I chose to go to Canada.
Okay.
I don't know why. 20-year-old Hannah has some strange ideas. So I did. I got home, sold everything, went to Cambodia. I didn't last the 3 months. I lasted 6 weeks, and I don't have any social work background. I had no training. I went to this orphanage to help them with English, and I left with a lot of trauma, seeing children pass away from illnesses that were very easily preventable.
Wow.
And I did not have the funds or the resources to help, and I couldn't help. And I thought, I helped as much as I could. And then what happens when I leave? Like this guilt cycle part. And I actually left then and said, I'm not able to volunteer with children anymore, but I still want to volunteer in every country I go to, because that's a way to give back and not be taking resources all the time. And I've stuck to that. I've volunteered all over the world, but mainly with animals. That's when I got into my animal work and wildlife rescue. So I've learned so much through doing all of these things about myself, about the world. But yeah, that ended up, pushing me on this pathway that I was meant to be on. I went to Canada. I met my husband, right? So, and he's from Australia, and he's from 2 suburbs away from me. And we had mutual friends, but we had to go to the other side of the earth to meet each other.
Funny how that works.
So that is, in a nutshell, most of that story. And I view a lot of my spiritual gifts through this lens of Pentecostalism, where the spiritual gifts are normal and accepted, but they just have a different name.
Sure.
Like prophecy is clairvoyance, and oniromancy is prophecy, right? That's the dream divination. So I now teach a lot of this stuff to people. I teach them how to use dream divination to figure out what their dreams are trying to tell them. And I teach them how to use different spiritual tools without the fear from the church or the guilt from the church that can often come with that. So it's a very unique perspective, because a lot of people do come with fear, and that will block your psychic gifts immediately.
Absolutely. So how did you find your way to those quote unquote witchy spiritual tools, such as tea leaf reading or tarot? Like where did that fit in all of this on your journey?
So the tea leaf reading was actually the first form of divination that I tried personally. The first time I ever had a reading of any form myself was when I was traveling Europe. So I was about 19 at that age. And on the way back, I stopped in Singapore. And I was with one of my colleagues at the time who was a 6-year-old woman who'd grown up in Singapore. She was Hindu, and she was just the total opposite to me in every way, in age, race, language, religious beliefs, everything. And we got along like a house on fire. And
Nice.
she said, I'll meet up with you in Singapore. I'll take you around. I was like, great. So as we're going there were certain Hindu temples that she's like, when I pass here, I must go in. I was like, cool, can I come in? And she's like, yeah, only to here. This is where you go. This is what you do. She told me all the things I had to do. And I remember seeing a different religion from another point of view for the first time. And I was like, oh,
Mm.
this is so colorful. Like this temple was gorgeous. It was like, I'm an artist as well. So seeing it, I was like, it's an artist's dream. Like it's so detailed. The whole outside is just pinks and blues and gold and orange, and it's just wonderful. There was no stage, there was no concert level sound system or anything like that. I didn't see the waste of money that I saw in the Christian church, the one that I grew up in. But I did see a lot of time and care that it would have taken to make it look that way, and people who were dedicated and people who didn't seem to care what other people were doing. Like they weren't judging each other and looking at each other and, oh, are you kneeling properly? Like it didn't have that vibe, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was more personal, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. Okay, cool. And anyway, I could only go to a certain point. And so she said, you can either wait here or blah, blah, blah. I'll be about this long. And I was like, great. So I waited for a little bit, kind of got bored, walked out. And out the front, there was this very ancient looking lady sitting on the ground. And she had a tiny parrot in a cage. And I was like, what is she doing here? So I just kind of went up and smiled at her, and she motioned for me to sit down, and I thought it would be rude not to. And then she pulls out these cards, and I was like, what am I doing? And she's like, put her hand out and grabbed my hand and started giving me a palm reading. And everything she said that resonated, I had this little voice pipe up and go, it's the devil. The devil's talking through her.
That old training, that old programming.
Yes. And that is a manufactured voice, right? That is, the church has manufactured that voice, that response. But it was very interesting because the one thing she said at that time, remember this is when I was 19, was that my current boyfriend was not the one for me. And I was like, please, we are getting married. We weren't actually engaged, but I was like, I've designed the wedding dress, everything. We're totally in love. How could you possibly think he's not the one for me? 2 months later, we broke up, and I was like, oh, she was right. But she had these cards. So she did a palm reading, and then she had some cards. The parrot came out and picked the card for me.
Wow.
And some of the stuff that she said was very interesting. I was like, whoa, this is very creepy, because it's very, very true. And it made a lot of sense with a lot of things. So that was my first time getting a reading, and it did scare me a little bit because it was so accurate, because it then ended up happening. And I was like, did I then cause that to happen by this? And, went through the usual thought processes that a lot of people do. And the answer is no, that didn't cause anything to happen. But it was a few years later before I actually dipped my toes, and tea leaf reading felt safe for me. It didn't feel too witchy. It wasn't tarot cards. Tarot cards took a long time to come around to. That was like, oh my gosh. But when I
But
did,
also the woman in front of the temple was that traditional was that traditional tarot cards or some other kind of card?
no, they weren't tarot cards. There is a term for them, because I am writing a memoir, and I did write this whole scene out because it was amazing. There is a term for them. They don't actually, I think it is outlawed now to use the parrots. So they don't do that there anymore. However, when I went to India in 2015, I did have another parrot reading from another man there. It was wonderful. Obviously, I should note I did pay for each of these readings as well, paying the people for their services, even though at the time I didn't know what I was doing. But the Indian one was really, really cool. And I remember my husband being he was like, what are you doing? You're just throwing your money away. I was like, dude, it's $1. Like, have some fun. I would pay this for a drink. This is going to a person. Come on, get yours done. And he wouldn't.
Yeah.
He refused. And Now, now he's had so many readings from me, and
Yeah.
he has totally flipped. He used to be Mr. Science Man, and now he's totally flipped. He's like, you have proved me wrong too many times.
All right.
He knows to trust my gut and to trust my intuition with a lot of things. And I'll tell you what, he can pull a tarot card now and tell you what it means as well. So he has learned a bit.
Wow. Okay. Go you.
Yeah. So yeah, so tea leaf reading was the first one. It kind of grew from there. I think pendulum was the next one that I felt safe enough to use. And then this was the whole while I'd been having this thought dropped into my head, or this voice in my head telling me to buy a tarot deck. And I was fighting tooth and nail against that voice, like, absolutely not. A demon will pop out. I cannot do that. But I feel like I should know I can't do that. So fought with that for a little while, and the tea leaf reading and the pendulum was the sort of my in between, trying to placate the voice. What about this? I'll do this one instead. Obviously, once I picked up the tarot deck, my whole life changed because of that. So that was what I really should do, and that was my clairaudience. Not that I knew it at the time, but
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
it all sort of brought me to here, Carla. That's
yes,
the moral of
yes.
the story.
Yeah. And now,
Trust
like,
the process.
how many tarot plus oracle decks would you say you have right now? Guess. I know.
Oh, I actually just sold two because I was like, I need to declutter. I'll get rid of two. But the rest I need. I'm looking at my shelf is like about to fall down. It is so full of at least 30, at
Yeah,
least, in
yeah.
the very minimum.
I totally relate to that, because like when I got my first deck, I had a classic Rider Waite deck, and I had
Mhm.
it for about 20 years, and I had different books that I used to learn it, and my thought was, okay, I know there are other decks out there, but I really want to learn this particular thing before I do anything else. So for 20 years, I only had that Rider Waite
Yeah.
deck. But then around the time, the pandemic, and we were all online and doing stuff, and then people started asking me for readings, like I hadn't really, like I wasn't offering readings. Like I do readings, but like I hadn't offered it,
Mm.
because I was just doing I was just teaching classes at this point. So all of a sudden I'm buying more decks, I'm getting more decks, I'm doing cards of the day, and I have I don't think I have as many as you, but I have, but it's like it went from one deck for 20 years to, to 10 in like 4 years. It's crazy.
Mhm.
So, but the thing is, different cards, different decks.
Artwork.
Yes,
Mm.
the artwork, they bring out different things in you.
Yeah.
They inspire different things, or they make you think different things. So now
Mm.
now it's a thing. It's a thing.
Mhm. I get sent a lot of decks from indie creators, people who are self-publishing their own decks, from
Yes.
indie publishers, from the big publishers. They'll send me decks to unbox or to review, and
Mhm.
so they're all on my YouTube channel, and I'm very honest with, like, honest, kindly. I'm kind and honest
Of course.
with each of the decks, and I'll very clearly say when things are like, I don't like this, or this is cultural appropriation, or this should not be in here. So I'm very clear on that. But then I'm also like, oh my god, I love this deck, this is amazing, we need more like this. So
Yeah.
if you ever want a deck or want to look for a new deck, definitely check out the unboxing ones that I've done. But I actually didn't start with the Rider-Waite Smith, which most people do, but it was
Ah,
too scary for me. It was way too scary. So
wow.
I started with something called the Shadowscapes deck, which in hindsight is probably the hardest deck to learn with. It is so, the images are so detailed and ethereal, and it's all in pastels, and it's kind of like fairies, and then some of the cards can be pretty dark as well. So it was one that felt safer for me to use, and
But
for a long
it's
time,
what drew you,
yeah, for a long time, I refused to cheat on my deck with another tarot deck.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
obviously, that notion is gone.
Yes. But I totally relate. I'm like, oh no, I can only have this one. I really need to figure this one out first.
I used to also be very, I'm a Virgo, so I like to do things right, and I like to do things by the rules and how it should be done. So when I first started, every single time I pulled out my cards, I would cleanse myself, I would cleanse my cards, I would cleanse my space. I use my tarot cards a lot. That's a lot of cleansing, and it's so not necessary. And it's over time when I've forgotten or been in a hurry, and I've realized that it really wasn't that necessary. So I had a lot of pomp and ceremony at first. Now I'm
Yeah.
so much more casual around it. And I think that's a necessary progression for me as well. I still think my tarot cards are incredibly special. They're incredibly.
Sure.
I'm more irreverently reverent of them now, in a way. To quote Pam
Yeah.
Grossman, I think that's a really great way to look at it.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think, at the beginning, we were always quite very precious with the things. And then as we develop our own style, as we are able to trust ourselves and our own practice and our
Mm,
own spirituality and just embrace whatever we are or who we are, then we're like, oh, okay. Someone else might look at what we're doing and think like, oh my God, oh, that's so lazy, or like, no, this is my practice and it's
mhm,
your practice, and
mhm.
everyone's practice is different. And you have, what's it, irreverently reverent? What was the term?
Yes, irreverent, um, reverent irreverence. I don't know. Pam Grossman always refers to it.
Ah,
This reverent irreverence. It's. I just love it. I think it's
I,
such an
I've
interesting take on things.
I have never heard that before today, so thank you very
Mhm.
much for introducing me to that. But I totally, that makes like, that
Yeah.
so resonates with me. And I think we're all finding our own way. And
Mm,
when you get to that point, you know what's special for you, you know what's reverent for you, and you are reverent in your own way. And it
mm,
might seem irreverent to other people, but where the meaning is. As long as you have a meaning for it, that's all that's important.
mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, oh my goodness, I don't even know how long we've been on. We've been on a while, but this is like so awesome. I've been like really looking forward to chatting with you. So I should probably wrap up. And I know, you have other things to do, but um, what is next for you before we wrap up? Like, what are some of the cool things, or even the not cool things that are coming, that are like bubbling under for you?
Yeah, so the things I'm working on, this September, I am reopening the doors to my Psychic Divination course. So, teaching people how to know and understand and recognize their psychic abilities, how it can come through, how to develop that once you figure it out, right? How to find your strongest psychic sense. Because, I've had past students from this course who have discovered that Claire Gustance was their strongest psychic sense. That was how they received
Wow.
most of their information. I know it is so uncommon, and they thought they weren't getting stuff. It just wasn't coming through in visions or words the way most people have. And so teaching them to interpret what was coming through taste wise or
Yeah.
sensation wise in their mouth was phenomenal. And it has changed the way that they practice. So it is, I love it. I just love it. I love seeing people go on that journey, and then teaching them these tools as well that we have, these different tools to, shortcut our way to the information. So things like simple divination terms like pendulums or bibliomancy, and then classic ones like tarot and oracle, astrology and palmistry, and then the free flowing ones, which are a little bit trickier for most people. But once you've done the rest of the course, then it opens it up for you. And that's things like wax reading, so caromancy, capnomancy, which is reading smoke, pyromancy, reading fire, scrying with a black mirror, all of these super fun things, tasseomancy, tea leaf reading, right? So there's so many fun things in there that it teaches people. So I'm really excited for that. That's coming out in September, reopening the doors for people for the first time this year. So that's super exciting. Behind that, I'm doing lots of creative projects. So I am creating a tarot deck. So that is in its early stages still, but it's
That's
probably a
so
good 2
amazing,
years
by the
away.
way. Amazing.
So that is going to be a tarot deck specifically for writers, so people who are creative writers and
Okay.
creators. So I'm a writer myself. I'm writing my memoir. I've written numerous children's books. None are yet published. They're just there. I've just written them, seeking publication. But there's a few publishers I'm in chats with around that. And then I've got, so I think I said my memoir and a supernatural fiction as well, which is uh, halfway done. The manuscript's halfway done. But I'm going to be redoing NaNoWriMo, so National Novel Writing Month, in November,
Hmm.
which is a
Yes.
challenge to write 50,000 words in 30 days. Now, I won the challenge last year, and I'm going to use it again to finish the manuscript this year. So that's very
Fantastic.
exciting. And my tarot
Good luck
is
with
going to
it.
help me with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's wonderful.
Lots
Gosh,
going on.
lots going on. Okay. All right. So then where can people find you online?
Best place to find me is probably on my website, so
Hmm.
suburbanwitchery.com. You will
Hmm.
find all of my blogs there. You can find links to all of my social media, because when it comes to social media, there are scammers. So sometimes you can follow the wrong one. So all of the actual links are on my website. There is my YouTube channel, which is Suburban Witchery. You can find me as Suburban Witchery on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, all of those things. So that's the best place to find me. I am responsive to my DMs. My DMs are open. If you have a question, I'm happy to chat.
Fantastic. I am so excited that you were able to, spend time, chatting today. And it's always a pleasure and just really fun just to get like this one-on-one with you today. So thank you so much.
You're so
And
welcome.
well, thank you so much. I'll stop recording, but don't hang up. But I just wanted to say, thank you so much for, on behalf of the You Are the Spell audience, thank you so much for being here and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. And I wish you all of the best and all of the different exciting things that you have coming on.
Thank you, Carla.
Welcome, Hannah. All right. Okay.